Mr. Mbasia, you made a salient point when you talked about certain battles that cannot be won by gun when it comes to ideological. Now, 8 years into the war in southern Cameroon's Ambazonia, we see that the cost is no longer only measured in lives lost or bullets fired. It is now etched into the minds of children who can no longer read, the hands of teachers too few to cope, and the broken silence of classrooms that once promised hope. The war has left a crippling mark on every sector, but the assault on education may well be the most far-reaching and damning legacy of the conflict. Across all three zones of Amazonia, Savannah, Atlantic, and the Midland, the education sector lies in tatters. In place of structure, learning is chaos, fear, and fatigue. Children eager to learn find themselves sitting in overcrowded classes, sometimes 500 students deep, with just one or two teachers left to carry the burden. These are not isolated incidents. They are a systemic failure, made worse by the deliberate negligence of a colonial regime that still insists it owns a land it has no intention of nurturing. Now, many of these educators are not even fully qualified, and yet they stand before blackboards with courage, dedication, and little to no support. They are expected to meet national education standards under conditions that would collapse any system. It is not just a staffing crisis, it is a calculated abandonment of a people. At the heart of this crisis lies a bitter irony. The war began when Ambazonian lawyers and teachers peacefully demanded reforms to protect their educational and legal institutions. The response from Yaoundé was brute force. What followed was not dialogue, but militarization. School buildings were shelled, communities militarized, and access to education transformed into a gamble with death. Today, the very parastatals, councils, and public infrastructures that La République insists it must govern in Amazonia remain ghost-like and dysfunctional. Roads are unusable, health centers are unstaffed, and schools under-resourced. Yet, the regime refuses to relinquish control, despite doing little to no governing. Now, one must ask, what kind of government fights to hold a land it refuses to build? While humanitarian agencies strive admirably to fill the gaps, distributing learning materials and trying to restore some semblance of structure, their efforts are ultimately no substitute for national responsibility. These organizations were never meant to replace functioning governance. The crisis runs deeper than what charity can fix. This is a war-fueled educational collapse, enabled by systemic neglect and international inaction. The time for indifference has actually passed, yet no one seems to be noticing, especially from the international community. Now, if education is a fundamental right, then what the children of Amazonia are being subjected to is nothing short of collective punishment. It is a generation being deliberately starved of knowledge, left to fend for themselves in a war that they did not start and a system that no longer sees them. The Amazonian people have demonstrated resilience, building community schools where they can, protecting teachers where possible, and keeping the flame of hope flickering in a hostile storm. But then hope without structure seems not to be enough. The international community has to reckon with its silence. Statements of concern are no longer sufficient. Diplomatic neutrality in the face of verified war crimes and state failures has become complicity. If world powers and institutions truly believe in the right to education and the protection of civilian life, then the war in Amazonia must be treated with the urgency and intervention that it demands. Until then, the school bells in Amazonia would not ring to signal learning. It would only ring to remind the world of promises broken and futures deferred. Now, Barca and Basia, while we know that schools cannot return to normal until the ongoing war is over, given that the collapse of Ambazonia's education sector stems not only from active conflict but from the colonial government's consistent neglect and failure to provide basic services in a territory it insists on governing. We wonder, could this pattern legally or morally strengthen Ambazonia's case for sovereignty under international law?
I think There's something that is so common there which they don't want to see. We agree that the education system has virtually collapsed. For whatever reason, they say, according to Yaoundé, the schools have been closed by Amba fighters. That's okay. According to us, and we think we're right, they close the schools directly or indirectly. That's still fine. But the community at large, the whole world knows that the education system has collapsed. And what does it mean? These children, while the war prolongs, the children who are supposed to have been going to school in whatever grade, are not waiting to grow up. Now, more children are being born in the streets, in the forests, everywhere. Women don't postpone delivery waiting for when the war will end. Children are being born. What Yaoundé has refused to understand, and we wish them to understand this, is that the victims of war, the children who are not going to school, are the potential breed of the soldier that will fight them tomorrow. Because our Amba fighters, our ASAs, and whoever is in the rebellion, we don't need PhD holders to be able to fight a guerrilla war. You need your PhD holders to go and sit in academic schools and sit in professional schools in Yaoundé. No, the Ambazonian War of Resistance, which is a guerrilla war, we don't need PhD holders. And this is a better breed for the future of this war. We should go back again to say, you cannot win this war by fighting them. You cannot do it by war. Because way back in the 1960s, when they pulled out Foncha, dismissed him, killed Joa, subsequently dismissed Muna, what saved them, and any other Ambazonian, they thought the game was over. Well, I've said it here many times before. Our people fighting now, our active soldiers, were not born in the 1960s. But they have become the liberators. They have become the army on which we rely. And they will all continue to grow in their ranks as long as this persists. Because they are growing up knowing what is happening to them. Why did they not go to school? It's because somebody shut down the school. Why was the school shut? Maybe there was insecurity. Why was there insecurity? Somebody was throwing a bomb and teachers fled. Somebody destroyed the school in an attempt to think that he was catching an Amba fighter. They were delivered in the bushes. Why? Because there was no clinic. Even when there was a small health center there, it was destroyed. Why was it destroyed? It was destroyed because they thought that Amba fighters were hiding in it. And so the cause of the war is not going to go away. The causes of the war is only fuel that would help us engineer the future fighters for the rest of eternity. And so the international community, like it or not, has to take note of what is happening. Because we have said a million times over, what we are going through right now was a product through connivance of the international community, so-called the United Nations. The United Nations is still there. The British are still there who invented this independent Bayani. They are still there. The French who connived to steal our property, bought us from UK for several million pounds, are still there. And so Mr. Biya is still there. He was there in the 1970s as a prime minister when they kicked out Muna. And he replaced her. He replaced Muna. He was there. And so the story is long, but the simple, short story to tell is, as long as children are going to school or are not getting the necessary education, that will take them out of the bushes. That will put them in comfortable offices in Yaoundé and in any other place around the world. They constitute a fighting force that even the United Nations combined with France and any other forces will not defeat them. And so until they realize it, again, what is going on right now is just a reminder to Yaoundé and their supporters, France in particular. Then the next 3 months, we'll have a government in Yaoundé, as I've just said. That government, let it be the government of Paul Biya or any of his harsh people, whoever that person is. France You are the orchestrator of all these things. Tell them, advise them, compel them if you can, to go and negotiate peace, to go and negotiate the end of this struggle, to negotiate the end of the occupation. Because we have right to resist. We are under siege. Nobody doubts that. And what do you do when you are under siege? You resist. You try to get yourself free. Somebody places his or her legs on your neck. You lie down and just die in silence? No. You push the person back. If you have the physical force, you throw him down. If it's possible, break his limbs before you run or before you stay. And so that's what it is. Our schools are the symbol of resistance. One. Our schools are the system in Nigeria I'm talking about, are the symbol of the oppression. They are the symbol of the torture of what we've gone through. And those scar marks, the wounds will heal, but the scars will remain for the rest of eternity. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Barrister Mbese, for that wonderful input.